Alrighty, so it's 11 o'clock and we're about to start. I'm Angel Hamilton with the Skill Sharing live stream with the Peterborough Audiocraft Festival today, Wednesday, March the 24th, 2021, presented by the Peterborough Independent Podcasters and supported by the hashtag Rising Youth Community Service Grants, the Taking It Global, Inspire, Inform, Involve, and the Canada Service, as well as the Government of Canada and Mars Music with Marcus and Peterborough City. And so today we're going to share, my class is called Angel Hamilton Audio Storytelling Documentary Masterclass. And so we're going to begin with this quote. Perhaps most crucially, earbuds transmit their voices inside your head. They roost there, rubbing shoulders with your own thoughts. Theaters and movie houses are communal spaces that exist to take you outside of yourself and transform you into a collective identity, an audience. But radio, television, and the web bring experiences to you. They're inside your home, and in the case of podcasts anyways, inside your brain. Glenn Weldon, it's all in your head. So when we begin your audio documentary script writing, make sure that you are aware of describing events and include the different voices and paint the pictures with your mind. Podcasting is intimate with your voice, like you're in somebody else's mind. And with its sound, without pictures, point of view, and you can choose whether you want to have a narrator or have B-roll conversations in the background, or to have it scripted and as a narrative, whether it be a digital storytelling using narrative devices or a series. Sound design is about the music symbolizing the characters and listening close or further away from the sound. And what you want to consider when you're editing is the story beats and the story arc. And Walter Murch, which is like my favorite documentary editing book, which is wonderful. I recommend everybody get it. Is all about pacing, rhythm, tone, keeping in mind the creative writing styles, like as if it should be a third person or first person, and what the impact will be on the narration. When you're mapping out and drawing out the scenes with storyboards, maintaining the character and relationship to the scene, and keeping the perception of the story in mind, do lots of research and establish the audio landscape. Just going to move my window here, 1 second. Anyways, and then when you're creating and establishing the audio landscape, spatial awareness is key. And if you're scripting the podcast, keep in mind where the mic is located and establishing the experiences of the sounds in the locations and the experiences of sounds within the interviews. Thinking about the experiences of all of the sound effects, all the different noises that are happening, whether it be outside in like traffic, you can use the mic and record so many different things like the wind and the ambient sound within the interview, all the different sound beats and sound shot lists that you have to think of when you're listening to any kind of podcast. You know, you can practice writing down the different sounds that you hear and the sound landscapes. And establishing a bingo card is really important, an audio bingo card. That's how I do my audio shot list, to convey the sense of place and a sense that your needs will be met for the script. And so you create the photo or story structure, like a photo board with a story structure. And you can use found images, you can use found free audio sound effects, and then you can edit according to a dramatic story arc with the story beats. what you're doing is drawing the mind's eye through the audio and through the story as it progresses through the story beats. Keeping the mental images and the visual pictures and the sonic signatures and sound design in mind, think of how the field recording will be edited with and after the fact with audio effects in the sound mix. So essentially what I'm saying here is that Walter Murch, he's actually the man who is exceptional film documentary and filmmaking, like dramatic filmmaking editor. He wrote In the Blink of an Eye, probably like 30 years ago. And he has really encouraged people to think about the conflict of the character and the action, the sounds of the actions, and all of the story beats that I'll talk about. It's actually over here that I wrote it. There it is. In the Blink of an Eye, a perspective on film editing. And the tenets are basically this. First of all, it's in hierarchy. So you have to think about it in hierarchy. First, emotion. Edit when you're making a cut in your audio. Think about emotion as the most important thing. So when you're looking at any of the clips, you're listening to the audio clips, you're thinking about the emotion being a number one priority. And then the second is the story. How you're going to fit it into the story arc. How are you going to fit it into the beats of the story? And the third would be the rhythm. And it helps when you do the editing, whether video editing or audio editing, to think about it like music with tone and beat and pacing and timing. You can even edit to music, like a really amazing tactic to do that. And sometimes you can, do the cuts to the beat, to the drum. And then the four, it would be in the way of video editing, the direction of the audience's sight. But in audio editing, it's similar. You're thinking of the audience's sound and how they're hearing it and the intimacy with the audience. And the fifth is the bidimensional space of the screen. And that's more for video, of how like the different layout of the screen is being video edited. But it's still important to think about how you think about it in your imagination and when you're listening to the story of how that would be playing out kind of on a theater, on a stage. And then the action, the space of the action and how that would be factored into the edit. And you want to ask yourself these questions. Number one, did the transition from one shot to the next make you feel a certain way? And two, did that cut help you understand the story? And three, did it happen at the right place rhythmically? And four, where is the eye of the audience likely to be looking? 5, are we convinced that person A is looking at person B? And 6, does the cut follow the continuity of the three-dimensional reality of the space? So basically what these break down to is that the number one is all about how when you're editing an audio clip, you're thinking about the transitions that go in between the different, like say an interview, of how like you're going to put in some B-roll and say like that means like the action of what somebody's doing. Say it's a baking audio podcast and you have the preparations of all of the ingredients together, and that's going to be like your B-roll, and that's going to be like a transition in between the different interviews with the bakers. And so you want to, when you're cutting it in the edit bay, thinking about the storyboard, thinking about the photo storyboard that you've created with your shot list and your bingo card, your audio bingo card, and thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to cut this in the software, like whether you're using Adobe Audition or Reaper or any number of softwares. And how does that make you feel? So you rewatch it and you think, how does that make you feel? And then you think, how does that cut help understand the story? So we're going to go back to the story a bit more for people who don't know about the story. So first of all, when you're making an audio documentary storytelling, you're thinking about your different choices that you can make. So first of all, there's this list I created: storytelling techniques, narration, post, no narration, recreate dramatic recreations. You can follow one character, talking heads, which means like experts, and then creative nonfiction, which is actually really new. And the person that I've worked with a lot over the years, L.A. Alfonso, he's actually taking creative nonfiction in public text over at Trent University. And in the little bit that I will share with you some of the projects that we've worked with together. And essentially, I really encourage a lot of people from home, because this is something during the times that we're all living in, that creative nonfiction is like a combination of nonfiction and creative writing. And you can, it's very personal. It can be very audio ethnography and audio audiobiography. And it can also be like experimental. There's so many different things. So I urge everyone to look up creative nonfiction as a genre to see how they can apply it to podcasting from home and in documentary storytelling and in making series. You can also make a podcast with chronological order or personal point of view. You can make it observational, or you can make it into chapters. You can make it into participatory, which is really like reminds me of being like an anthropologist, or having like a participatory, like active agency in your podcast storytelling. And as well as you can make it poetic and expository, which just means, like explaining and exposing a different journalistic story, and self-reflexive, which could also go into creative nonfiction as well, or just be journal and diary. And then you could choose to be performative or narrative nonfiction and experimental sound art. So these are the kinds of things that you can choose different combinations of these different things, or just, the one on its own. How to edit an audio documentary. So this is just a fundamentals 101 intro. And basically, like, the number one is the goal in audio documentary storytelling editing is to focus on somebody with whom we have empathy. That person wants something. Usually it's difficult to achieve, and there's often a struggle, internal and external. The story has to have a satisfying resolution, and it has to be unexpected and also inevitable. So what this refers to is establishing your audio landscape with your sonic signatures visually in a picture, mentally, of how you're writing the script. It doesn't have to be like a full-on script, like in a narrative. With documentary, what they call something called a treatment, which is just basically like a couple paragraphs, especially because you don't know what you're going to find in the field a lot of the time. So it's a couple of paragraphs of what you think might be happening with the interview and what be happening with the field, with following somebody around. And so you're drawing the mind's eye through the audio as that story progresses, and you're trying to convey that sense of audio place with your brainstorming, with your audio shot list. So that conflict that's happening within the character, that's ratcheting up, you're thinking about that when you're editing. So you're listening to lots of good samples of story structures in your favorite podcasts. You're reading lots of transcripts that will be useful. Lots of scripts is really helpful to read lots of scripts. And you're creating an outline of your story and your storyboard. And that helps you when you're doing your editing. And then you're writing an editing script from the text that you have chosen from the interview and the text that you write from the narration. So when I've done my editing, I've often done what's called a script, like an editing script. And so essentially it's just making all of the ins and outs and the timeline of like where those beats are, so I can scramble them up together like a little Tetris game, like a little puzzle. I usually use cue cards and try to figure out on the board in front of me of like where do those fit into a story. And then you include an opening and a closing for your audio documentary. And you can use music, you can use different kinds of effects, audio effects. You can use different people's voices. You can use robotic voices to have variety other than your own voice. when you're introducing and also concluding your audio documentary. Excuse me. Assembling a rough cut of the story on the timeline is really important, and try to get as much feedback as you can from your friends and from your family. And practicing the narration. You want to do that at home, like in your home studio, and certainly before you push record. And you want to have all of your elements that you most needed for the story, as well as you include the room tone of the room, which just means recording with your field mic or your home studio mic, what the ambient sound is of the location of where you're interviewing from. Which captures the experience. It could be like a car going by, or maybe there's a different kind of hum of like some sort of fridge, or different things that are happening, and to create that authentic moment and that sound background for the feeling. And that's really something that a lot of people will add in what they call a Foley library, which is basically an audio clip and special effects for audio catalog that they'll choose from. And so they'll record the tone of the room a little bit. I usually do 30 seconds before and after the interview, so that I can edit into the audio documentary for authenticity. And you want to decide if you want to include music to strengthen storytelling, and if you want to have it running throughout the entire piece, or if you want to have it royalty free, or music that you can have from permission. You just have to ask permission to have. So in my experience, it's been really amazing to use a lot of royalty-free music when I'm doing my documentaries, like my video documentaries. But with podcasting, it's been fun to actually ask musicians, like local musicians, which, I've never actually had any local musicians say no. They always say yes. They always want to be a part of a podcast or a radio documentary and have their music out there one way or another. And always get feedback on your story, especially when you're in early stages. The earlier, the better. You can ask anyone. You can ask professionals. You can ask your friends and family, and finalize the edit before you go on to exporting on an MP4, ideally, and then you upload it into your, Podomatic, or in this case, Peterborough Independent Podcasting Association website. But I also use SoundCloud as well. And yeah, so that's how to do that. And basically, it takes a lot of practice. I'm really just got my little baby finger dabbling into Adobe Audition. I started off in Trent Radio in 2005. And only a couple of years ago did I start to experiment with the idea of podcasting and actually being able to create a couple of different things, and then be involved with L.A. Alfonso while he's been he's a major filmmaker and editor. So I've just been being an assistant and learning along the way. So Blake Snyder's Story Beats, the storytelling basics for story editing. So this has been really important in a lot of editing for video, and as well as audio storytelling for podcasting. So what you want to remember is that your opening image, whether it be visually or in an audio landscape, it's going to be a visual, or in this case, an audio sound landscape. That's really important to remember, is that you can transfer all of these things that are made for video into audio, and using all the narrative techniques that people use when they're doing theater, when they're doing dramatic independent films, they can transfer this over into the audio, to the podcasting, which I think is very exciting and accessible and inclusive. So basically the representing the struggle and the tone of the story, you want to have that in the opening image, the snapshot of the main character's problem, and you want to establish how the adventure begins. The setup is expanding on the before snapshot. So you want to present the main character's world as it is and what is missing in their life. And then you want to state the theme, what your story is about, the message, the truth, the personal experience, and your context to support it. And you always want to consider your audience. Like it would be different for creating a story if you were making it for children versus making it for, boomers versus making it for, mid 40s somethings. You always have to think about your audience, who's listening and who you're making it for. And then having the catalyst moment, that's where the life changes. That's the before the world is no more and change is underway. So that just means that that's when you have say an example would be the Frodo in the classic journey of the Hobbit, of how he goes off into the adventure. And that the catalyst moment would be when he's having to go out and strike out on his own to the land of Mordor because his home he has been, destroyed, and he's forced to leave. And so then there's the debate. Can I face this challenge? Do I have what it takes? Should I go at it all? It's the last chance for the hero to chicken out. And that's really crucial when you're thinking about the story and the beats of the story. In podcasting or in documentary or in any filmmaking, is because you want to have that moment where the suspense, you're ratcheting up the suspense and the peak. It's kind of like you think about it of going up a mountain, and there's these different places on that mountain that you can stop and start, and that makes it more suspenseful and more exciting to be listening to. And then you want to think about breaking into two. So the main characters makes a choice and the journey begins. They leave the thesis world, the mundane world, and they enter the upside down world, the opposite world of Act 2. So that's really just about how we have this a mundane world versus a imaginary fantasy world, and how things start to go upside down and opposite and start breaking up. So this is where the character has to have an internal moral conflict. And usually there's action, and the experiences of those sounds of those actions is really important to consider when you're making the story script. So basically the B story, that doesn't always have to be included, but it's there as when the discussion about the theme, the nugget of truth, the discussion between the love interest and the main character. B story can be a love story. That's more for the independent dramatic filmmaking, but it definitely will be helpful if you're making a narrative storytelling podcast. And then the promise of the premise, when the main character explores the new world and the audience is entertained by the premise that they have been promised. And then the midpoint is the moment in when everything is great and everything is awful. And then they get what they want or they don't get what they want. But not everything we think that we want is what we actually need in the end. Yeah, so that's really a crucial point in the Blake Snyder story beats. Because basically that's where the wisdom starts to come out in the character's development. And the bad guys close in. That means that the doubt, the jealousy, the fear, physical, emotional attempt to defeat the main character, the goal, and the situation disintegrates. And then all is lost, opposite moment from the midpoint. It's awful or great. The moment they realize is they have lost everything that they have gained and they have no meaning. The situation looks impossible. And one of my favorite parts of Blake Snyder's is the dark night of the soul. That's the part in the story when you think that all is lost. And the question of why hast thou forsaken me, that hopelessness and that falling completely before you can pick yourself up and try again. And the break into three is where the fresh inspiration and last minute thematic advice and the character tries again. And then the finale, the main character incorporates them, the nugget of the truth makes sense. And then they fight for the goal because of the experiences that they've had. And they all synthesize together. And then you bring back to the final image. And that's with the opposite usually of the opening image, proving visually, in this case, audio, that changes have occurred within the character. So you can apply this when you're doing documentary or narrative or creative nonfiction or journalism even. People think about how they're going to, when they're editing and creating these scripts, to use the Blake Snyder. So he wrote an amazing book, has the word cat in it, I forget at the moment, but I highly recommend looking him up. and you can have access to these PowerPoint afterwards. And so Joseph Campbell's been a huge part. When I talk about a story arc, I'm talking about Joseph Campbell's hero journey. So it's the classic, using for The Hobbit, for example, like you can imagine Frodo going from his little hobbit land into the land of Mordor and come back and save the day. So it's your classic hero journey of ordinary world, you're called to adventure, the refusal of the call, the meeting the mentor, crossing the threshold, the tests and the allies and the enemies, the approach to the innermost cave, the ordeal, the reward, the seizing the sword, the road back and resurrection, and the return with the elixir. So essentially, like I have it all spelled out here. The call to adventure is meaning the hero is living within their ordinary world, but receives some sort of calling to change their life and enter the unknown. The refusal of the call is about the hero turning away from their calling because they feel some sort of obligation to stay where they are, or fear that they're not brave, smart, strong enough to begin the journey. And then the third is the supernatural aid. When they agree to heed the call to adventure, the hero's guide or mentor, often magical, wise, and superhuman in some way, appears and becomes known. The fourth is the crossing of the first threshold. The hero leaves their ordinary, mundane world, their known world, and they enter the unknown world. And that's where the journey will take place. So fifth is the belly of the whale. The hero completely severs their connection to the safe world that they left behind. And in this stage, the hero makes the commitment to fully engage with the journey and the transformation of the self. And the sixth refers to the road of trials. The hero goes through a series of trials that test the hero's character and ability. And seven, the meeting with the goddess. The hero encounters a powerful love or an embodiment of good. The hero must earn a connection with the goddess. And eight, women as a temptress. The hero is tempted away from their journey and the ultimate reward. And nine, atonement with the father. The hero comes to terms with the realization that their parental mentor figure is mortal and flawed. The hero will have to rely on their imperfect being for help. And 10, the apotheosis. The hero reaches some sort of higher understanding, equipping them for the final and most difficult stage of their journey and their transformation. And 11, the ultimate boon. That refers to the hero achieving what they set out to do and acquiring what they set out to obtain. And 12 refers to the refusal of the return. The hero is reluctant to leave their magical world and return to their ordinary world. And 13 is the magical flight. The hero realizes they must return to their community and bring their enlightenment and back to their community. The hero may have to escape and receive supernatural assistance to return. And 14 is rescue from without. The hero may be too weakened physically or mentally to return with the boon and must be retrieved by someone from the ordinary world. And in 15, the crossing of the return threshold. The hero reconnects with the ordinary world and must discern some way to keep their boon and integrate the new knowledge into the way that the old world functions. 16, master of the two worlds. The hero understands and is able to balance the separation between the two worlds, often in some material and spiritual sense. The hero bridges the gap and then seems to exist between how they begin and how they have returned. And then lastly is freedom to live, mastering the two worlds, leading to the hero's release from fear of death. This allows them to live without fearing their past or future. So just want to say, you don't actually have to apply any of this in your story writing and in your script writing, in your editing, when you don't even have to have any of those things that you're applying. But having that as part of your mythology, as part of your background, as part of your research, like the Hero with 1,000 Faces book with Joseph Campbell was hugely transformative for me when I was in anthropology at Trent, 15 years ago. And it really helped give me that understanding of when I was going into, the documentary lab. And it helps so much when you're going through your why and developing your character, when you're doing your podcast storytelling editing. So just keep that in mind. But you can restructure and reformulate and revolutionize that whole hero journey and turn it upside down on its head once you kind of understand it. And it's the same with story editing. Walter Walter Murch's story beats and Blake Snyder's story beats. You can start experimenting with them once you start utilizing them and using them all the time and start practicing. So audio storytelling tips. You want to edit, like I said, the emotion is #1 first priority, and then you edit according to the story beats, and you use your rhythm and your tone, and you create this audio landscape. Your use of the background noise and the atmosphere noises and the sound of action are really important when you're creating a narrative in a documentary. Audience will notice if the sound action is missing. So that's really incredibly important to keep that in mind when you're creating a podcast. And what is the scene trying to achieve is the kind of question that you want to have written up on your wall when you're doing your editing and you're doing your writing. And what is the point of the scene? Is there something in the scene where you were trying to achieve a visceral impact? And how do you want to express the drama of the scene? So I'll often think about how the character spatial awareness is scripted based on the different anticipation of the movements and the senses. They'll think about the transitions and how the narrator has an omniscient voice, or the character would be present for the events, and how the drama would be unfolding, trying to anticipate what kind of drama there might be, and write that down as part of my shot list of what I'm looking for. And important to remember is the conflict of character and action, and establishing, and the conflict of character and action just means that the conflict between oneself, conflict with other, conflict with nature, conflict within. This all creates these kinds of different psychological perceptions and realities that people are having to deal with on an ongoing basis. And those experiences of those sounds, when you're creating, asking people about their memories, asking people about their experiences, to visually draw that mind through the audio story, you want to really bring out their perspective. And so sometimes you might have to ask them and remind them for different phrasing, for different ways to state it, so that you can bring those audio elements out into the interview so that you can edit them later. You want to establish the shot and experiences of the sounds in the interview. And you want to put the mic close, say in this case, to the keys. Like if you're someone's typing, or you want to have it on the immediacy of the soundscape. And the audio shot list is really incredibly important. And you brainstorm whether you're going to be in the field or in the studio, and you create a photo storyboard. And you create the cue cards to assemble and reassemble like in a puzzle, or a Tetris game. You reassembling them all the time above your, you can use a digital help with the little yellow cue cards, which I tend to do on my computer, but sometimes I'll just have them over on my desk. And then you want to convey a sense of place, and then create, like I said before, an audio bingo card. And you have found images and found sounds and audio pictures in your head, and you record the movement and the senses and the action and the transitions. And you keep in mind the volume of the sounds, whether sometimes if they're really high, that's going to convey a dramatic tension and dramatic moment. And if they're really low, that's going to be secretive and creating a sense of drama of keeping things really quiet. And there's always a reason why you do that when you're editing. And you're reminding people that in the podcast, you can record it with different phrasing. And you think of podcasting and digital storytelling as making a comic book. And I think that's really important, because you're literally having an opportunity. If you want to, you can even create a comic book to go with your storytelling as well. So I have an example here. I'm just going to check the time. But my Angel's Bike by, yeah, it's 11:30, so if we have time. So I'm just going to show you this, and I'm going to go through the script, and I think we'll have a good time doing that.
Hey, Angel, we can't hear it.
Oh, thanks for letting me know. I wonder what went wrong there. Maybe I'll just skip that and just go straight into the script then, Aisha.
Okay.
No worries. I don't need to. That's interesting. I have no idea what went wrong there. Anyways, so you guys can watch Angel's Bike another time on your own. It's on my website on fractalbutterfly.org. So I wish just to have a takeaway from the Angel's Bike would be the use of narration, the use of music, the use of bicycle and traffic noise, special effects, using musical strumming as transitions, the use of music to introduce and develop the character and conclude with pacing, rhythm, and emotion, and use of volume for developing of the character. And yeah, so basically, like I have a little script here. You guys can look at the PowerPoint presentation later. You guys can have all a copy of it. But basically, it's just a little transcript that I did yesterday. And this movie I made with my friend Nathan Kopjar. He actually is more of the director, and I'm like the subject of it. And we did it together as a collaboration effort for film school for an assignment. And so, yeah, so basically it starts out with the music in the beginning, and then I have this lock that I have to unlock for my bicycle because it was locked up for a long time because of a manufacturing error inside of it. Anyway, it's a very funny video. And there's a lot of sound effects of the traffic going by. There's the music and effects from the pizza shop that are in it. And a lot of me talking about how I loved my memories of being on my bicycle when I was in Mother's Bay as a kid. And then how I had some challenges moving around from different places while I was going to film school. And so, yeah, I was exploring that. And then basically the music in the background creates a mood, and it creates this tension, ratcheting up this drama, this tension about how, I'm broke and I don't have any money and I don't have a place to stay. And that, shame and what have you that goes through it. So you can hear it with the interview, with the music, how it's been composed in the background. And basically like the sounds of the saw, the sounds of the traffic, that's because I'm literally, my friends feel like lent me a saw to like get through this lock. And so it's actually really quite funny. It's just only like I guess an 8-minute little documentary short. It's probably fine that I'm not playing it because I just can continue talking, and that's probably for the best. So basically like the action audio of the saw during the narration, like you can use it in the editing. You're thinking of like the story beats, you're thinking of the story arc, you're thinking of the audio landscape and all the different ways that you want to have it, the timeline layers. So you have like different color codes for different editing. So you have like your narration on one line, and then you have like your sound of like the audio of the saw, of like the sound effect, and then you have like the music, like say the strumming, like creating that kind of continuity and sense of pacing and rhythm and tone for the film, or for the audio landscape and audio storytelling. So basically, like in this script, it talks about how like I was able to break it free. It was really freeing and empowering. And there's music of me kind of going off into the sunset. But first I have to go to the hardware store. And so like we were saying in the story arc, there's like a moment where the hero is like frustrated and trying to find solution and kind of wanting to give up. And it was really funny in this experience with the hardware store guy, because basically what I'm not saying in the film is actually that I got that lock from him like week before, and I was kind of hoping that he would just tell me that he would replace it for me, or that he would get the locksmith for me and like try to unlock it. But that's okay that he told me I would have to go get a licensed locksmith and then have to like break it free with a tool. And it was really fun to get the tool and to break it free. And so there was music strumming transition over top of the narration as I was realizing that I would have to do that. And then I did it. And then I was able to, have like this kind of sense of accomplishment. And there was like an amazing On the Bike with a Guitar with Megan Gerbrald, and she's actually on Bandcamp if anybody wants to check that out later. She's really incredible, and Nathan was able to convince her to be part of so that's where all the music strumming comes from. So she was part of Angel's Bike with the music, and he was a musician too, so he was just really amazing at like doing the editing for this Angel's Bike. And I was like, in the media lab a lot with him. And so we were brainstorming all the different ways to make it, like to create the shot list, to create the story, and then to edit it together to create the ratcheting. But it was definitely more to do with Nathan Kopjar and his brilliant mind. And he got help from, our filmmaking friends and whatnot. And so basically, like, I'm going to move on. The What is Art? It's a web series and a podcast by L.A. Alfonso and myself and Media Arts Peterborough that happened a few years ago in Peterborough. And there it's like 90 minutes, I think 6 series. And we did like at least 100, maybe not quite that many, but a lot for a few years of podcasts. It was actually on the radio, and then it's been put on to the Peterborough Independent Podcasting Association. I've only put on 2 so far, but I have many more to put on there. But anyhow, and so basically, like, it was really amazing for me. Oh, I'll just stop it for a sec. Amazing for me to realize that documentary can just go from like video, like what I normally would think about video, into audio, and how audio and Trent Radio could go into video and how they could go back and forth like that. So What is Art started off as being, in this case, a video, and then it went into audio. And I find it really fascinating how that worked. So I'm not sure if this volume, tell me if it's not going to work, but let's just see if the volume does work. Can you hear it?
No, unfortunately.
I wonder what happened. Can you tell me what to try?
Yeah, stop screen sharing and then just start it again.
Okay. Does it work now?
No, I don't know if you started screen sharing again.
Oh, of course. Sorry. Okay, we'll figure this out. Where's my screen sharing button?
It's a green button in the Zoom toolbar.
Okay, so now I'm out of my thing. That's okay. Where's my other window? There's my keynote. And then, so let's see if this will work. My play button. Does it work now?
No, I can't hear anything.
We'll just have to skip it, I guess. No worries. I'll just keep talking, Aisha. All right. I don't know what's up with my technology, but that's how it goes with technology. All right. So basically, this is the Media Arts Peterborough presenting the web series by L.A. Alfonso. And there's like the art is constructing a symbol, and art is everything. Art captures a feeling. Art is my passion. Where the rubber hits the road. Art is a 3-letter word, and the airing edition. And then the What is Art episode 2. So yeah, so anyway, so basically the take home message, you guys can listen to it on your own or watch it on your own. But for What is Art, it started off in Trent Radio, and then it did field recordings at the outdoor farmers market downtown Peterborough, as well as their LA thought of this amazing idea of having a robot voice in the beginning and at the end, introducing the show and having interview style. And there was intro and bio of the artists. And we asked 4 questions. Usually, what is art was the number 1 question. And we would ask like questions like, what would you ask your 12-year-old self? And we would include a closing of where it was recorded and the theme music by Ecoplex. And there was a lot of electronic music provided by Nostalgic Home Highways. Both are local musicians, local contributors of amazing music. Yeah, so that was a pretty incredible experience, and you can listen to it on your own. And it's probably for the best. My technology doesn't work because I don't have too much time to talk. So yeah, I'll just keep going. So basically, Circus Boy was the project that is actually from last year, and that's the Circus Boy documentary is directed by L.A. Alfonso as well. And I just jumped on like kind of last minute as a co-producer. And so thankfully, Troy Armstrong has been there to help out as a co-producer as well. And camera by Rob Viscardis and Pavel over there at their company that they have downtown. With the cameras, and they're just absolutely amazing. I highly recommend them. And Jared Bremner was doing the music, and then the music mix by Michael Phillips, which is a sound engineer in Peterborough. We have an incredible amount of talent that we can draw upon. And basically, like, Circus Boy was an amazing example of how a podcast, documentary storytelling, creative nonfiction series, 3 episodes, began on, originally had been on Trent Radio, 92.7 FM dial, and then was put on to podcast, put online on Soundproof. And LA created this amazing audio creative nonfiction podcast called Soundproof, which I have a picture for in my slideshow, and basically was able to ratchet up the kind of excitement and tension and drama of following this amazing circus boy with a steer wheel, which is this big round loop, named Ethan, and this amazing couple, Thomas and Michael. They're like, married, and so basically they adopt this boy, and it's part of Social Circus. It's part of this really amazing, touching story. It was at Reframe Film Festival for 2020 of last year in January for its premiere. And then hopefully we're going to be all getting our industry pass for hot docs. So hopefully we'll be able to, find a distributor this summer and whatnot, and be able to share it with everybody online. But basically, it all started off with being this wonderful podcast online. So I really feel exciting that people can start interviewing with their home studio, with their home equipment, and then they can get enough excitement that they have friends and family, crowdfunding, art grants, things like that can start coming in. Because once you do that, it's a lot easier to go into video at that point after you do the podcasting. Okay, so my next slide. Oh, that's a picture of Ethan when he was younger. LA has actually been following him for a long time, since he was like, what, 9, 10? Anyways, and now he's like, I think 17. So it's quite amazing story. And there's Thomas on the left-hand side, and Ethan, he's just so sweet. Oh my gosh, they're amazing with their steer wheel performance. They actually did a steer wheel performance at the Market Hall, to a full house and showplace, or at Market Hall, and it was really exciting for me to see that, to witness that. Okay, so I don't think that's going to work either, but that's the steer wheel. Doesn't matter if the audio works. Anyways, so the take home for the Circus Boy podcast is the use of composed music, the use of narration, the use of sound effects, the use of music mixing, the use of volume adjustments, the use of story beats and the story arc, and the pacing and the rhythm and the timing and the transitions. So L.A. Alfonso is an amazing filmmaker for a long time. So his ability for story editing and technical prowess and audio editing and music, and working with musicians and working with music composers, music engineers, is pretty amazing. And so it's kind of intimidating sometimes, but I'm learning a lot from it. And I've constantly been challenging myself to find out ways to do it myself. So that's why it's so incredible to do this skill sharing workshop with you, because it's something of an adventure and of a journey that I'm so excited to share with everybody. So in my film, Polysex Confidential, which anyone can watch online, I actually did this at Documentary Film School. It's my very first documentary that I ever made. And basically, like, it's interviews with a sex educator, Julia Saunders, as well as some people that are polyamorous. And it's actually been watched 14,000 times, which is kind of crazy, and I'm shocked by that. But anyways, it's on YouTube, it's on Vimeo, and I used music, I used audio interviews, I used the story beats and the story arc quite extensively to edit it myself, and I shot it, and I thought of the story, and I used myself in it. as well, and use of sound effects. I think back to it, I probably could have used more of a narration to kind of guide people along, and put in more facts about polyamory, which is all about a relationship style, open relationship style, relationship anarchy, that talks about compersion, which is really just all about questioning jealousy, and possessive love and codependency, and having more of an expansive view about romantic relationships. Yeah, anyways, it's the rocky road of polyamory is explored in that film. And so I highly recommend people listening to it without the video and just listening to the audio landscape and of how that sound landscape was created. And the different kinds of voices and how they're with the music, with the tone, with the pacing and the rhythm, was creating the emotions that I wanted to convey with people in the audience. All right, so let's just get to the next slide. And so The Fool's Tale, directed by Angel Hamilton, the takeaway notes. So people can watch that as well online. And music from Harry Manx, which is one of my favorite musicians from Salt Spring. He's Canadian. And the music from Cinematic Orchestra, which I put in there, which I didn't actually get the permission from, but because I put in such a small amount and it's non-commercial, I guess I was allowed to use it on YouTube. But you have to really be careful with that, because if it's going to be for commercial and advertisement, you really want to make sure that you get permission to use your music when you make a documentary. And I used a Foley library, and I used sound effects when I was able to edit this together. And I did everything with this documentary. I wrote it, and I edited it, and I did all the sound, and I collected and coordinated all of the music and field recordings. So I was using narration, I was using interviews, I used the beats of the story that Blake Snyder I learned about in documentary film school, as well as Joseph Campbell's story arc. And this was all a film about the passing away of my friend David Howler Fletcher, that disappeared at the ocean in Texada Island. So I met a lot of really amazing friends. It was during a diversity electronic music festival. And it was all about the clown, the Hayoka, the sacred sad clown that gives us the magic of laughter, but also dealing with grief and the drama of having my friends have to deal with his sudden disappearance, and how touching and magical and healing that was, but also shocking and sad. So I was really in a very sad place, and I meant to make the movie a little bit more comedic, but I remember just being so sad, and it came out through the narration. But it was very healing and transformational, and that's really important to me in any kind of creation of art. So I was able to use the timing and the pacing and the rhythm, and that's because I was listening to a lot of electronic music while I was doing the editing of the interviews and of the B-roll and of the archives. And so that was how I was able to do that, as well as using silence for the moments of grief and the moments of sadness, and then my tone inflection of how I was speaking. And I was able to ratchet up the drama by using the music and the music audio mixing, and the use of all the audio archives. And so that's where you create this, like I said, found sounds and sound effects from a library that you can get for like free, like from like the open source audio libraries that exist out there, to be able to create like a whole sonic signature and audio landscape of all the different audio images that you want to create emotionally for your audience, to be able to emote and have an emotional connection. Okay, we'll just keep moving on. And so I made a documentary, Free Dawn Staniford, which is all about the aquaculture industry and the silencing and muzzling of salmon activists in the West Coast. So my takeaway for the audio storytelling was, use of music, and as well as the use of interviews and B-roll and archives and the story arc and story beats and the tone and pacing and rhythm. Yeah, you guys can watch that online anytime as well. It's really funny. There's a lot of salmon in it, and Pacific sockeye salmon from the Fraser River specifically. And that's really like the main point of the story is about having people fall in love with the salmon, the wild salmon, and question the whole aquaculture industry and how the open net fish farms were jeopardizing not only the salmon as a species, but also jeopardizing freedom of speech and freedom of expression, and using social media and online and making websites and blogs. They really put a kibosh on that, and that film was made 12 years ago. So yeah, it was a wake-up call, I think, for a lot of people, of what you post online can potentially be used in a court of law and defamation. So it was a really intense experience. And when I look back on it now, I think, wow, I'm going to really, re-edit that for like a podcast for just audio, because I feel like it could ratchet up the drama and the suspense even more. Anyways, moving on. Soundproof is what I was talking about earlier. That's L.A. Alfonso's creative nonfiction audio podcast that my friend Carly was the co-producer on. And of course, Michael Phillips, the audio engineer. But I was involved with contributions from Angel because I was actually able to take the field mic and go in the Market Hall. He's my very favorite musician of all time. And he came on my birthday. So it was very exciting because the album was Only Then Will Your House Be Blessed. And Harry Manx allowed me to interview him as I was going from his car with his equipment into the elevator. And I was able to, I get so excited thinking about it, record all of those sounds and on my audio bingo card with my audio shot list. And I was able to interview him in the green room and then actually be able to participate in filming for the audio purposes, but also had it for video as well later. The Market Hall performance. And so then that was all cut and edited by LA. And he was able to have, this incredible professional, like sounds good, Mikey.com, like, oh my gosh, like the recording studio of Michael Phillips. I can't say enough good things about him and Trent Radio, how like the staff and the volunteers and everybody contributed to making that just such a special audio documentary storytelling podcast experience. And I highly recommend that people find their favorite musician and that they are able to do a similar kind of experience. And so I'm not sure if that audio will work either. So we'll just keep moving on and then just, there we go. So the takeaway for the Soundproof Harry Manx interview was like the use of the field recordings and the interviews and the sound effects and the music, the pacing and the rhythm and the story beats, of course, and a little bit of comedy. And there was an intro and an outro in the script and lots of good timing. But there was use of the sound storyboard and use of a sound shot list. So like I said before, like you can actually create with photos, with found photos or photos of the musicians, a bit of a storyboard with your intention to create the kind of story arc and reach those story beats before you even go into recording and into the studio. So that when you're editing it later, you're thinking of that, thinking of how it's going to be told in a compelling way. Okay, so then LA also did a Soundproof podcast with me as an interview. This was really exciting for me because basically it's my breakup, my Bowie breakup, it's called. It's about my experience seeing David Bowie, which was amazing because I was actually in the front row and I actually took my shirt off, and it's a comedy podcast because I am so funny. Anyways, and so he interviewed me, and the take-home notes of that is the music, of course, of David Bowie, and the sound effects to ratchet up the excitement and the intensity and the drama of me being at a David Bowie concert. The whole thing was about me having a breakup with my long-term boyfriend at the time in Edmonton. He was actually jealous of David Bowie. His foot was like stuck in gum the whole concert long at the Winspear Theatre. And we'd gotten these tickets like outside, I think, just last minute. And we were in like front row, but everybody was sitting down and I was the only one that was in like, I don't know, hippie wear that was just discovering David Bowie, and I was dancing and I was totally in love with him. He was wearing leather and it was a very sexy experience. And my ex was older than me and he was jealous. And so it was really quite the compelling audio storytelling documentary that LA thought of. And so it's very exciting. And he used a lot of dramatic devices and classic narrative structure and storytelling devices to use to make it more dramatic. So the use of archives and story arc and a lot of pauses and silence mixed in with pacing and rhythm and timing. So yeah, go listen to that when you can. And all right. So, and lastly, Birthmark, which is, I'm just going to check the time. Oh, we ran out of time. It's 12 o'clock. So basically that's, you can listen to it on your own. And are we done now?
No, go ahead. You can keep going.
Okay, well, I'll just quickly just wrap up then. Basically, everybody check out online L.A. Alfonso's Birthmark, maybe, because basically it's the use of the podcast. It started off just similarly to Circus Boy as a podcast, as a documentary podcast and audio storytelling. At first, it was 3 episodes actually on Soundproof, I believe, before it turned into any kind of video, before the grants came in, before any kind of crowdfunding came in. And so it was very exciting. That was an examples of his story editing and his field recordings and interviews, music and sound effects. And I'm the co-producer, and it's a 78-minute finished film. So I'm really happy that I'm the co-producer with LA Alfonso's Birthmark. So it's very exciting, and I highly recommend anyone listening to that. And basically, like, I just put in this, you guys can look at this later, and you can have access to all the PowerPoint presentation. But I just put in some books to read about sound design, filmmaking, and some podcasting resources to check out. The most important thing out of this list is to check out the Sundance Collab Masterclass Creating Soundscape for Your Film, Audio Storytelling with George Lavender. He's my #1 favorite, and Murray Stiller is my audio teacher at Documentary Film School at Kaplan University, and he published a book called Sound Design for Filmmakers. It's on Kindle. And these are my favorite podcasts that I love listening to. StoryCorps is my #1 favorite place to get all of my audio interview questions, and I love listening, like everyone else, NPR's thisamericanlife.org. All right, so there we go. To wrap up, and you can listen to my Naked Angel Virgin Vinyl on SoundCloud, and then my website's fractalbutterfly.org, and contact me for any questions. And thank you for listening in my Skillshare hour.
Angel, we have a bit of time to keep going. Do you want to go back? I can screen share and play one of your films if you like.
Great.
Which one would you like me to play? I think we only have
Angel's Bike.
Okay. Sorry, bear with me, folks.
Thank you so much for doing this. I'm so happy to be here today.
Awesome. Okay, here's Angel's Bike.
This lock inside has been locked for 6 months, ever since I got it in September, and I haven't been able to unlock it because it broke off inside after I got the master lock for 3 days. And then I've been trying to get everybody and their dog to try to like unravel this lock, and I haven't been able to do it. People have been calling me to phone the cops or phone the police station or the fire trucks or the city hall. But I'm worried because I got it from Craigslist and I don't have any bike license. I don't have any paperwork. My very first bike was a Blue Angel. It was I had a blue seat, a banana seat, and I was able to learn how to ride my bicycle. And I was taking care of my friend Jody's rabbits. And then I moved to my own place. And then I couldn't afford that. So I moved to my friend Christine's place to take care of her dogs. And then I couldn't afford that. And then I moved to Tent City. And then after moving to Tent City, I moved to Jillian's apartment. And now I'm about to move someplace else because I can't really live there anymore. I'm currently broke. I currently have no money. Currently unemployed and don't have any money. Because I'm broke, I just feel ashamed and humiliated that I can't even resolve the situation. It's limiting my ability to engage within my community and participate in attending events such as theater and yoga classes, and food and housing, basic needs. And it doesn't help with having my confidence and self-respect. It makes me feel like I'm a loser, like especially living in the city, in a materialistic, culturally, capitalistically obsessed culture. Makes you feel like you're not able to live up to the standards, the standard of living, of which is the status quo. And then you feel like you are unhappy or unfulfilled. Then you feel like no matter how much education you have, how much spiritual, creative, energy that you have within this society, if you don't have any cash, you're pretty much nothing. And it's been unresolved such a long time that it's kind of embarrassing, and I feel embarrassed that my bike is still locked up. And I probably should have been unlocking it a long time ago instead of procrastinating and allowing the thing to rust during the entire winter.
I got this handsaw from my friend Svi, and I'm going to start the process of freeing my bicycle. Cut through rubber, but I don't know about steel.
I don't have a car and a license. If it was unlocked, then I'd be able to ride around, go to work, and go to school, and visit my friends, and get groceries. And the bicycle would be really helpful in getting all that done. Yeah. I don't think it's going to go through scale. I really, with all my intuition, with all my educated guess, all my knowledge, with all of my being, do not think that's going to go through scale.
I continually find myself in a cycle of avoiding things that need to be resolved and procrastinating on resolving things that I see as problems, but are actually challenges that could be met one at a time to be able to build my self-respect and my dignity and be able to empower me to make positive changes in my life. And that bike is mine, and I, deserve it, and I'm good enough for it. And it's okay to have my bicycle. It's okay to ride my bicycle. And to have it locked up is to lock up my my freedom. I have a bicycle that's locked up on Commercial Drive and Broadway for the last number of months, unfortunately, and I haven't freed it. It's actually rusted and stuff. So I'm wondering, how do I break my bicycle? What kind of tool would I need to break my lock?
How do you lock it?
It's a master lock. It's one of those U-locks.
It's very difficult.
That's what I'm discovering for the
I
last
think
number of months.
your best bet is to call a licensed locksmith,
Oh, okay.
and they would have a tool to open it.
Oh, I see.
Because even a bolt cutter or anything, that won't do it.
That's what I was thinking too. That's what's deterred me, because I've
Otherwise,
tried
everybody
to
would have one of those.
Well, of course. If you're continually finding yourself fearful and scared, in like a phobia of like being on the bicycle, and not able to address those fears, and you just keep putting up barriers or excuses, then you end up just self-repeating, self-fulfilling prophecy. It's a cycle. My name is Angel. My friend Nathan, he led me this power grinder, and I'm going to free my bicycle today.
Okay, let's just do it. Okay.
This is gripping. This is so gripping. Okay. All right. All right. This is so scary. Okay. I think I'm ready now. Okay, I'm just gonna go. Woo! Woo! I did it! Yeah, my bike's free! And now my bike is free! It's free, I tell you! I can't wait to bike it. I can't wait to ride a bike. That's exhilarating! More power tools! It's all rusty. I don't even know if it'll run. Poor thing. Are you ready, Freddie? It's kind of cold out here. Whoa. I did it. I did it.
Alrighty. Well, thank you guys very much for coming.
Yeah, thank you for coming, everybody, and apologies for the tech difficulties. We could go a couple minutes longer if you want to take some questions, Angel.
Sure, would love to.
Folks can use the raise hand button, and I can activate your microphone, or send questions in by chat.
It's so lovely to see all of my friends like Fox Jones and Mary McGillis like telling me that that was great, and all these beautiful encouragement. Thank you, everybody.
I had a question. I found it so interesting when you were talking about kind of framing these scenes, framing your audio in terms of like, you could do it in terms of close-up shots, long shots. I wondered if you just wanted to talk a bit about how you approach audio in a visual way?
Yes, thank you. When I'm thinking about audio in a visual way, when I was like editing, say, The Fool's Tale, I was actually thinking about how my emotions, most important thing when you're doing any kind of story editing, any kind of story writing and script writing, is the emotional senses, the sensations that go through your body in a visceral way. You yourself were emoting when you see or you listen to the music, to the interview, and then when you're editing it, you're thinking of like, oh wow, like the person who's going to listen to this, they're going to have that similar emotion. And they're going to have that similar kind of like, so when you have like a loud interview, then that's going to be really exciting. That's going to be really like thrilling. It's going to be psychologically like anticipatory of what they're going to expose next. And then when you drop down the volume in the editing, and you think of like how like that's going to create more of like this quiet moment for them to contemplate, to be peaceful, to relaxing, to understand what you're trying to convey. And I also really important, like you said, with framing the shot, with having like the different, like with the camera, you have like a close-up, you have like a whole panoramic sense of place of the whole setting and setting the context, and if, like for the macro and the micro. Similarly with audio, you do the same. You're creating that soundscape, and you're actually thinking similar to your camera, but you're using your mic instead, and you're thinking about what they're going to hear, how they're going to have a close-up of like the mic close to their voice, close to them, or if you're going to have a distance and like farther away, and how that's going to create and convey a sense of space and a sense of emotion and a sense of like the story is the most important thing, of hitting those story beats, and then getting that checklist and that shot list and the audio bingo card.
That's amazing. Well, maybe we'll give another couple seconds for folks to raise their hand or send a question in, but thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge.
Yeah, I'm grateful for all of your questions. If you have any more questions yourself about anything as well, it's very much fun to be here. I'm so glad you're putting this on. I think we should definitely do it again, because there's a lot of skill. If I was to do another skill sharing, I think I would probably want to do it on like the whole thing of like producing, because I know that you had your workshop about budgeting, but a lot of people don't know how to write a treatment. They don't know how to write a presentation or a grant for, say, an audio podcast, specifically, narrative or creative nonfiction and storytelling. So it'd be really fun to do that another time.
Yeah, we'll set that up, and folks can follow you through your website, Fractal Butterfly. They can follow Pip, and we'll be posting events, probably your upcoming production event.
Yeah, my upcoming production, I'll tell everybody just quickly, is I'm actually doing it on Jeannie Thompson, and her relationship. It's a work in progress for like over a year now, but her relationship that she had with Dolores O'Riordan from the Cranberries, and apparently the guitarist lives in Peterborough, and she lived in Peterborough in the Kawarthas for 20 years. So it's a work in progress. It's something that of a passion project, and so hopefully by the next time that I do a Skillshare, it'll be completed for deliverables for the deadline for Pip. So that's why I really like about these things, is accountability and creating a momentum and creating that kind of community is really important for creators and people like me. So thank you.
Nice, awesome. Well, your slides will get sent out in the.
Thank you.
There's an automated email that'll go out from Zoom. That'll
Beautiful.
have a link to your slides. And thanks so much, everyone, for coming. And thanks, Angel, for being here.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you very much for having me. And thank you for all of our audience and everybody. And I like it how people are already saying we'd love something on grant apps.
Okay,
That's great.
Bye, everyone.
Okay, bye.